I did get a letter, and also it plays off of last week. We talked about the little, Canadian midget that I slapped the shit out of, Santino Marella. And I had a lot of people supporting me, and a lot of people said, oh, what a horrible human being you are. And the opinions were varied and different. And part of it was kind of cut down the middle as what I could tell by age, depending on how long you'd been a wrestling fan. And then I got an email from Graham. I won't give any last names. Dear Jim, I'm working on a project for my English class in which I'm explaining one section of Dante's Inferno. After reading the book, I realized that all it was is a shoot promo from Dante to the Catholic Church and his country since they banished him and etc. So I asked the king of the shoot interviews to make your own Inferno, the Cornette Inferno. What would be the worst sin in the wrestling business, and who would be there in the Inferno, and what sins do you have to commit in the wrestling business to make it to the Cornette Inferno? Much respect to you and have a good day. And we were talking about this last week, that the whole reason I was upset at this fucking clown, and I'm not going to in any way apologize to Santino Marella, because he was being a dipshit and he knew what he was doing. If he didn't know, it was his fault he didn't know, because he'd been in and around the wrestling business. And like I said, he thought he was a hot shot shooter because he had a amateur background or whatever, and he was trying to tell the people in the amateur class that he was, a big deal and whatever the fuck. So I'm not apologizing to this guy, but I realized when I heard the tweets and I read some of the emails, it may not be, it's certainly to their detriment, but it may not be the fault of either the today's modern fans, or especially today's modern wrestlers, that they don't know the difference between taking the business seriously and not. And I got into this a little bit on the Ross Report also, but I already intended to talk about it because of this email today and because of the feedback. It seems like people who were alive when wrestling was big and presented properly and taken seriously and presented as it's supposed to be, are disgusted by the stupid shit that these kids do these days. That is to their detriment. And for people who weren't alive at that point, they can't understand why this entertainment phenomenon is supposed to be taken seriously, and why it only really works to its best efforts when it is taken seriously, as we talked about the Watts angle or whatever the case. And so I'm just wondering now, is it their fault that they weren't able? Is it the fault of the wrestlers who never got a chance to experience that, who have grown up reading about everything on the internet, thinking that everybody knows? And I also, since I got the family in, my nephew-in-law is like 27 years old, and he was like 10 or 11 years old during the Attitude Era. And he watched wrestling then, because a lot of people did, and he hasn't really followed it closely. He's from Northern California, so he's seen that hood slam horse shit, which is a bunch of untrained fucking clowns making a mockery of the wrestling business. That's not limited just there, but it's what they do there. And even he knows that that's stupid. And he didn't want to see any more of it after he saw whatever it was he saw. But is it... I guess what I'm saying is, if you don't understand because you never were involved in it, is it really your fault that, or is it your fault because people are trying to tell you and you don't fucking listen? What do you think?
I don't know. It's a tough question, actually. I mean, beyond the Santino thing, give me another example.
Well, for example, okay, and of course, we just, right before press time, we got to see this Will Ospreay and Matt Riddle match that I guess a lot of people are raving about on the internet, and somebody said it was the best under 10-minute match ever. Did you hear this? I did hear that, yes. Okay, well, I know you've seen it, and I just took a look at it right before, and I mean, I'm going to put Matt Riddle over here in a minute, but it was a standard independent wrestling match between a couple of guys that are green and they do too much shit. And from the audience reaction to for example, first of all, the ring announcer, by the way, I don't know who the fucking ring announcer was. This was Progress Wrestling. He looked like a hobo living in a cardboard box with fucking tennis shoes and goddamn baggy pants. And somebody ought to take him out and hang him in the parking lot. It was totally unprofessional. Matt Riddle looks great, and he's the real deal. He's a former UFC fighter. He's had an MMA background, great physique. I mean, classic babyface looks, the long hair, good looking guy. He's green. He's only been working about 18 months. And actually, I wish I had a kid like that in OVW where he could be trained properly, because you can tell that he's picking up some stuff on his own. I don't know who's trained him, but he's making a lot of mistakes, simple elementary mistakes on the basics that could be dangerous and either hurt him or somebody else. But they started out at a nice pace where Riddle jump-started it, and Ospreay was actually selling at the start. And Riddle would strut around and fucking milk it, and then he'd pick him up and give him a slam, and Ospreay would sell it. The only problem was, who was the fucking heel? Riddle was supposed to be the heel, but the fans were cheering the shit out of everything heelish that he tried to do. He wasn't really cheating, but he was being obnoxious about it. But the fans were cheering him. Then they start cheering Ospreay. And they went a nice little pace at the start for the first couple minutes, but then Ospreay just came back and started doing a bunch of shit. Then both of them started doing just a bunch of shit as fast as they could. Then it got sloppy. There was this horrible reverse Hurricane Rana, which is a move that should be banned anyway, because its only effect is to really hurt somebody. It can't ever be safe and look good.
It is the stupidest fucking move in wrestling.
Stupidest move. No, nobody should ever take it or try to give it. But so fucking Ospreay slips off, but Riddle takes a backflip anyway after the fact. And Riddle doing all the slapping stuff and just slapping. And they just basically started doing a bunch of shit to each other for no reason. The fans are cheering both. There's no heel, there's no baby face. It's just a bunch of guys alternating, beating each other up and diving. And then Riddle, because he's a shoot fighter, that's why they figured this finish, I guess, taps the guy out. And the baby face taps out clean in the middle to the heel. They ain't no revival, folks. I'm sorry. And I think Matt Riddle has a tremendous future. And if he could work a territory like Mid-South Wrestling, or if he could work underneath somebody like an Eddie Graham or Dusty Rhodes, or if he could work just any of the territories and work his way up from preliminary to middle card to main event or whatever, he has all the tools, all the looks, all the charisma in the world to be a star. Will Ospreay is an athletic kid who, doesn't look like he could whip anybody in a real fight. He looks like he's in grade school, but as part of a tag team, he probably could have gotten over as the guy who sells and gives the bigger guy the tag in the old days. But this was just an exhibition of just a bunch of guys just doing a bunch of shit to each other for no fucking reason. And the fans that were there were cheering both of them and cheering that, because and is it their fault? They can go back and look and see what wrestling's supposed to look like on YouTube now and on the network. But they like this shit because it's like I was telling my nephews, like video games. The guys now, to their detriment, instead of trying to make it look like a struggle and a contest, instead of trying to have any psychology and build a story amongst two personalities that you can tell easily who to cheer and who to boo and what's going on, and make it pay off with a climax and nobody gets hurt, but it looks like they do. Instead, these kids that play video games are trying to make the matches look like these video games, or like for a previous generation, like my generation, like a fucking kung fu movie scene, which was entertaining to watch and was, kind of cool in some respects. And I, was a big fan of Bruce Lee, and he wasn't fake, but it doesn't bear any resemblance not only to what this stuff is supposed to be or what it's supposed to look like, but also it's dangerous and people get hurt and nobody takes it seriously. And that's to the detriment of the guys that are involved in it. Careers are shorter. Major injuries requiring surgery are more prevalent. It's harder than ever for guys to get over and to be taken seriously by the fans to where that they will buy tickets to see them. And yet the wrestlers do nothing to mitigate all those things. Instead, they do stuff to exacerbate them. And I'm sorry, but if you look at who has drawn money, even over the past 15 years, tell me the top 5 top names off your head that have drawn big money in wrestling in the last 15 years for any company. Go.
15 years. Obviously Cena, You probably have to put Triple H on that list. Who else has drawn money?
Well, I mean, you know what? Did I leave out 15, then 20 years? Because then you got Austin and Rock.
Right. Austin, Rock, if you're going to go to 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and still they draw and Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
And actually, I wouldn't give Triple H credit for drawing any money. He's the guy that works with the guy that draws the money. But the point is, whether it's Brock Lesnar or John Cena or The Rock or Steve Austin, or going back a little further when Ric Flair was still wrestling regularly, the point is people believe in those guys. Regardless of whether they think wrestling is all horseshit, the guys that draw the big money are guys they believe in, and they don't do stupid shit, and they're not constantly out injured. And, John Cena could do a lot of that shit because he's a great athlete, but he doesn't because they don't want him to, because if he's hurt, it costs him millions of dollars and costs the company tens of millions of dollars. And I know everybody wants to get noticed and get over, but God damn, the way to do it is not, and then the guys who just know that they don't have the talent or the look to ever be main event guys, but they want to be wrestlers and they're marks. And whether it's the slow motion fucking hand grenade spot or that fucking thing that Chikara, the guys in pajamas did, where they did the fucking snake charming dance thing. You saw that was viral. Or these fucking idiots, the Joey Ryans of the world that work with women, or goddamn Kenny Omega, going back to the wrestling Dante's Inferno to answer the question, what's the cardinal sin? The motherfucker that worked in front of people with a goddamn blow-up doll, Kenny fucking Omega. Fuck you, by the way, you piece of shit. You goddamn take a shit in your fucking hand and smear it all over the face of the fucking business I've spent 35 years of my life in. I've lied on the witness stand in open court to prevent exposing the wrestling business, and you work with a fucking blow-up doll. You're a fucking piece of shit, and you should be boiled in oil in Cornette's Inferno. But that's the kind of shit, to me, if I see guys like the Revival, or if I see, and I hate to just mention them, I guess I got to watch somebody else, but I can't find anybody else I really like. The Ring of Honor has plenty of great talent. Adam Cole, Jay Lethal is a tremendous, the Briscoes, I've always been fans of, et cetera, et cetera. But even they will do funny shit just for the sake of doing funny shit sometimes. Not as bad as these other ass wipes. But I don't understand why. In a business where now your window of opportunity is thinner than ever, and the chance of injury is greater than ever, and the chance of you getting injured while doing something that people are not even going to fucking take as real to begin with is pretty off the charts, that chance. Why do you do silly, stupid shit that's incredible or uncredible and make mockery of a business you're in to where now you're beating the shit out of yourself and your opponent in an exhibition that everybody already knows is phony, and you got to make it more fucking phony. You got to throw gasoline on the fucking fire. So, and I don't blame the fans for not taking wrestling seriously if the guys in the ring doing it don't. And once again, it's not about, well, we're all going to make them believe it's real again and kayfabe's going to come back. Although, as everybody knows who has a lick of sense, we'd be a whole lot better if kayfabe had never left town. And I love these fucking people that tweet me going, aren't you glad that now the people don't climb the rail and fucking try to stab the heel? No, I'd give anything to have that back, because then wrestling would be successful again. But I don't blame the fans for just cheering everything and saying this is awesome, whether the heel's beating the babyface up or the babyface beating the heel up or whatever, because if the guys in the ring don't take it seriously, then why should the people that paid money? And I don't care, whether they know everything or not. They don't have to, as Jerry Jarrett once said, they may be smart to the business, but they're not smart to my business. Some guy, well, they already have. Brock Lesnar's already done it, and Heyman's a wonderful mouthpiece because Brock couldn't say suey if the Hogs had him on a promo, but Heyman has convinced people that Brock Lesnar's the real deal, and Brock Lesnar being the real deal has obviously not hurt in that mission, and people believe that fucking Brock can kick somebody's ass. And so there's an element of suspension of disbelief that you can still have. And we are not going to get wrestling wrestling may never again go back to the major arenas for more than one company and crowds of, 10 and 15 and 20,000 people for regional territories and et cetera, and ratings of, 30 and 35 ratings in Memphis and 70 shares, or, huge ratings for Mid-South Wrestling. We may never go back that far. But I have to think that somebody can come along, just like Brock has done, and they don't have to win the UFC title, but they do have to have an aura of being a grown man that looks like they can whip somebody in a real fucking fight. And they have to be somebody who doesn't do this stupid sports entertainment bullshit or funny spots to pop the crowd and get a chant from 500 people. This is awesome. Somebody that the people can buy as legitimately being who they purport themselves to be. And they can draw big money again, even if it can never be as big as it once was. Wrestling could certainly be taken a little bit more seriously than it is right now. But until those people come along and try to do those things, it's going to continue to be something that passed once a year when the family goes to see the WWE event in town, like, Ringling Brothers or Holiday on Ice or the Harlem Globetrotters, or past 500 or 1,000 people in a fucking rec center or a goddamn high school gym somewhere. And it's a shame that America pretty much established and invented professional wrestling, and it's more popular now in the United Kingdom, as we've talked about, than it is in America. But still, they've got that mindset over there of doing this video game spot fest bullshit in some of these matches, because that Osprey and Riddle match was in England. I don't understand the guy's mindset at all in making an already difficult job trying to convince people of anything even worse, even harder, and going out there and doing shit that you could potentially seriously injure yourself at doing to try to make people laugh at what you're doing while you're risking your neck to do it. And boys and girls, just so you know, it's never going to draw big money or big crowds unless they believe it. And that's just been proven by fact and by history. And I would love somebody to come and say, whoa, I can cite this example of this match drew 15,000 people somewhere, and it was a fucking comedy match where they just fucking, did these goddamn goofy spots, or a guy wrestled a girl or a blow-up doll, or they got it together and made up silly names for each other and wore pajamas. I'd love to, or they just did every spot that they knew to each other over and over, back and forth, with no goddamn story or psychology or semblance of a contest. I'd love for somebody to be able to quote me that statistic, Brian. Do you have one of those off the top of your head?
A comedy match that drew that kind of crowd? No.
Or any of these spot fest video game bullshit matches. Just any of this modern day, we're just going to go out there and just run around a lot.
No, I mean, because even something like, the J Cup, for instance, like in 1994, where you had guys like Great Sasuke just doing flips and Hayabusa, you had someone like Benoit in there who was believable, who, was chopping them down to size in their matches. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a good example, no.
Well, maybe a member of the cult of Cornette can. For Christmas, send that to me so that I can study that and report back. But, hey, once again, I'm not in the wrestling business anymore. I'm in the Jim Cornette business, and I'm retired from taking bumps. If I do, it'd probably be by accident from here on out. And it doesn't affect me, but the business that we have all loved for so long, and if you want to be in it and you want to do anything more than play wrestler, if you want to be a wrestler, have some goddamn respect for yourself, for the business you're in, whatever. And that's why I slapped the shithead, because he didn't have any fucking respect. He thought it was so cool and so funny that the boogeyman was going to scare his daughter in front of 500 of my fucking fans in my hometown that I had to keep coming every goddamn week. And he was going to leave and everybody else was going to leave, but I had to run that fucking business, and they had to keep coming every fucking week. And somebody's going to shit on it and wipe their fucking turd all over my business? No. When I was broken into this business, was lucky enough to be allowed to be a part of this business, if guys had gone out there and done these silly spots in the underneath matches, when they came back, If they were lucky, the only thing that would have happened would have been their bags would have been thrown out the back door and they wouldn't have been allowed back in the locker room, and the booker would have fired them on the spot. If they hadn't been lucky, they'd have let them back in the locker room and they would have limped out or been carried out because the guys policed their own business. But it used to be the big joke. So-and-so, had a match with the Invisible Man trying to kill the town, whatever the fuck. That's the only time that guys did shit like that was when they were so mad at the promoter they wanted to kill his town and give their notice at the same time. You remember why I fired Buddy Landell the first time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
The first time was 92.
Yes.
Why did you? I don't remember, no.
Buddy Landell... it was a tremendous talent. We've said it many times, and Buddy said it more than anybody else. He was his own worst enemy between the substances and just his attitude sometimes. But Buddy Landell had been a main event guy for Crockett and was going to be even a bigger main event guy, and, partied too much and overslept the TV and got fired there. But I was using him and intended to keep using him as a main event guy in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He'd been a main event guy in Continental in Memphis. He was working a program with Tim Horner. And the reason for it was I was going to, basically get Buddy some heat off working with Tim Horner, who I considered a middle card hometown guy, and get Buddy ready eventually for for another run at a top guy or whatever. But the point is they have an I Quit match in Freedom Hall in Johnson City. And Buddy didn't like Tim Horner.
Now I remember.
Yeah. And Tim Horner came off as an obnoxious little prick to a lot of the baby faces who used to call me and complain about him, saying, well, Horner says the office is going to start taking our gimmick money. No, we're not. Or Horner pissed me off this way. Riggy Morton had called me about him. Tracy Smothers called me about him. He was an obnoxious little prick in a lot of cases because he was frustrated because he was a middle card guy, and that's all Tim Horner was ever going to be. But in this instance... that's behind the scenes. In this instance, they were in an I Quit match in Freedom Hall in Johnson City. Buddy Landell did not like Tim Horner, did not respect Tim Horner. So when Horner gets Buddy in some kind of fucking hold that's supposed to be painful and excruciating, and the referee holds the microphone down in front of his face, Buddy sings, Moon River. Buddy was done. I told him, Buddy, what do you do? I said, well, sorry. I don't care if you kick shit out of him in the locker room, but you exposed business in front of the fans and you're done. And I didn't bring him back for 2.5 years until Bad Buddy had been replaced by Good Buddy. And then he had a great run. But I don't know how else to explain it. You're just cheating yourself. You're hurting yourself, and you're lying to yourself if you're a wrestler and you think that this funny shit or this goofy shit or this see-through shit is the way to go. You might, as Buddy used to say in his promos in Mid-South Wrestling, you might convince some people that you're a goddamn, big deal on a local level, but really you're just a fucking local yokel from the goddamn Brooklyn Kmart, whereas I'm an international yacht broker from Toulon, France.